Well, greetings and salutations, everyone, and welcome to, depending on wherever you may live or however you may look at your clock, this early morning or middle of the night bonus upload. Before we jump into this middle of the night or early morning bonus, a couple links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It doesn't cost a cent. Click that like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads I put out daily, click that bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all these things really do help the channel to continue to grow and go. And yes, folks, they definitely do matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump into this middle of the night or early morning bonus upload, shall we? Today's first Tennessee subscriber submission. Hey man, I am a subscriber, and I'm just going to tell you that you've helped me out a lot more than you could ever imagine. I honestly had no idea these things existed. I believed in Bigfoot, but not Dogman until last year, the beginning of winter. My buddy has a piece of land that butts up to a 10,000 acre park. It's called East Farm or East Fork, and it's in Jamestown, Tennessee. Here locally, it's known as L.B.L. Me and my best friend Seth have hunted this place so many times I could not even begin to tell you. It's one of those places that makes you feel like someone is watching you all the time. It's a very unsettling place. Back before the 1900s, there was a lot of witches and black magic type junk. The road going down to this place is a steep decline down a mountain, and about 3/4 of the way down it takes a left and you cross a really narrow bridge that leads you to a gravel road that goes back into the woods at least 5 miles. Back in the early 70s, a guy hung himself on that bridge. Back before Dogman or werewolf happened, just that alone gave me the uneasy feeling. Eventually, I got over it. Me and my buddy got comfortable enough with the place that we'd walk around at night with nothing but a headlamp on the dimmest setting because we didn't want to scare the animals. We were always both armed when we got there. I'd usually take my AR-15 and my friend had an AR-10 with a night vision scope. We really started carrying these guns after that winter evening. It was probably 3:30, maybe 4. I was in my buddy's truck with the window up, and my buddy was standing pretty much right there in the driver's side door. I mean, he had one leg out of the vehicle and one in. We had a tag along this day. His name was Dylan. He drove his own vehicle down because he wanted to bring his four-wheeler. We were sitting by a cabin, which is on my friend's property, built in the early 1900s. You can really tell how old it is when you walk in, and the doorway is only about 6 foot tall. I don't know how many times I've hit my dang head on that thing. Anyway, myself and Seth were just sitting there watching Dylan trying to start his four-wheeler. He probably cranked it 3 or 4 times, and it just wasn't having it. I guess where it was a cold winter evening, it was probably 35 degrees. The time it finally started up right before it died, I kid you not, that if I had to guess, it was a half a mile away and sounded like it was right beside us. It sounded just like a werewolf would sound, like in a movie. Like that long kind of sound, like a man was in there as well. It only howled once, and I would say it lasted 10, maybe 15 seconds. Seth and I just looked at each other in disbelief and couldn't really speak. Dylan didn't notice it because he was on his four-wheeler and it had finally started up. We never saw anything, but I laid my hand on the Bible, and I tell you, it sounded just like a werewolf in a movie. Typing this message is literally making my stomach turn. I don't tell many people because most wouldn't believe me anyway. And that's all right, because I've offered to take anybody that hasn't believed me, and yet not one of them has come with me. I also heard this about 3 months later, first thing in the morning like daylight. I do a lot of deer hunting and hog hunting, and the Dogman, werewolf, whatever it was, when it howled at daylight kind of made me think that it was its way of showing us this was his territory. This time, it was quite a bit further away. It'd say anywhere from a mile to a mile and a half. I mean, it was the same exact sound. Before all this happened, me and Seth would go down there and throw out a lot of corn, hunt 3 or 4 days out of the week. On the weekend, we'd normally hunt Saturday night for pigs, if we were going to hunt at all. We have drastically slowed down and hardly ever go to that place anymore. Actually, about 2 or 3 months ago, cops found a dead body back there by the river. That should help you know just how desolate this area is. There is no service, not even any power lines, so if anything happens, a man would be pretty much screwed. Also in this area, just a couple of miles away, a man got a picture of a black panther on his game camera. I just wanted to share my experience with you, man, because you've helped me a lot. Thank you, Jeff, and I hope all is well, brother. Today's second Tennessee subscriber submission. First and foremost, I have to say that I do not care if you believe this or not. This is not a campfire tale, but a true story based on 2 encounters I had during my lifetime with a creature known as Dogman. I will not disclose the location, but I will say I've lived in Middle Tennessee since I was born in 1986. I've heard thousands of different stories and lores about this land that we have lived on and the surrounding areas. Ever since I can remember, I've been roaming and exploring the woods that surround our property since I was 8 years old, and I've only had 2 encounters with this creature. Once when I was 14, and this year, 2020, at 34. During my first encounter, I was walking with a friend. We'll refer to him as Ronnie. Ronnie was 3 years older than me at the time. I was 14, he was 17. We knew the woods surrounding the property like the back of our hands. We had been squirrel hunting for many years back there, along with just roaming and exploring. Ronnie had been telling me stories about a demon deer. I figured that he was just attempting to scare me while we were deep in the woods. Coincidentally enough, when the wind stopped blowing, we noticed there was no noise, no insects chirping, no birds tweeting, squirrels barking, just dead eerie silence. In all my experiences in the woods, this gave me a sense that we were close to a big predator. Honestly, the biggest game that could possibly be in this area was a big-ass white-tailed buck. I mean, maybe a black bear, but those are way more common in eastern Tennessee. There was an instant where Ronnie and I would hear like a woman screaming or being murdered, which we later wrote off as maybe a bobcat or something. We both started looking around to get a sense of the surrounding environment. After a few minutes of no wind and noise, the tops of the trees west of our location started to sway. As we listened, we could hear this whoosh, whoosh, every time this thing jumped from one tree to another. The trees were swinging, groaning, popping underneath the momentum of this thing's weight as it launched itself from one to another. To be honest, I have no clue what the intentions of this thing were. I'm not sure it was trying to intimidate us, get our attention, or maybe just get a closer look, but Ronnie and I were not waiting around for this thing to jump to a tree above our heads. So we sprinted out of the thicker brush, stumbling onto the old logging road. We could hear this thing following us by the sounds of the trees again snapping and popping as this thing was now swinging on the trees that were literally 20 feet away. We were so terrified because there should have been nothing in those woods with the ability to swing and launch itself from tree to tree moving like that. At the time, I hadn't even gotten a glimpse of whatever it was swinging atop the trees. It sounded like a 600-pound wood-roaming gorilla. We didn't stop and look, we just ran. We bolted down the old logging road, all the way back to the road and down Ronnie's dad's driveway and into his house. We never spoke a word of it to anyone. Hell, we didn't even see it. What would we say? Fast forward 20 years, I'm now 34 instead of 14. Up until this second encounter, I have not known what it was that scared the holy crap out of Ronnie and I that day in the woods 20 years ago. Current date is August 14th, 2020. So I'm chilling out in the backyard, smoking some killer nugget and burning this God-forbidden pecan wood that barely burns unless you have a very hot fire already going. The fire pit sits about 15 feet from the edge of the tree line. Now, I know what you're thinking. Oh man, you were smoking pot. You probably hallucinated this. I have never hallucinated while smoking marijuana, and I am a psychedelic advocate. I've dropped LSD numerous times, along with smoking 5-MeO-DMT and NN-DMT, and never, while even on psychedelics, have I ever seen anything even close to this. As I'm relaxing by this fire out back, I hear a loud pop. I instantly snap my head up to look in the direction that the branch breaking noise came from, and that was the instant I first laid eyes on this thing. Blinking 2 or 3 times to actually make sure I was actually seeing this thing. Standing at the tree line 15 feet from my fire was a gigantic black outline of what looked to be a wolf standing on its hind legs. I was shocked at the sighting, but noticed very fast that I did not feel afraid. I didn't feel negative energy coming from off of it. What I can only describe as literally an 8-foot walking wolf. I didn't feel the sense of evil everyone talks about. I actually felt relaxed and at peace with him being so close to me. As I looked closer, I noticed that its hair was well maintained, didn't smell any obnoxious odors, or smells of decay and death as many others have described. This thing looked civilized, tamed, intelligent, advanced. Hell, I'd even say this thing looked enlightened with a knowledge I was totally unaware of. Its eyes were not amber as other accounts describe. This creature's eyes were a fluorescent blue. Mesmerizing, to be quite honest. As I'm looking, I noticed it had 3 braids in its hair on the side of its head. It reminded me of a Native American-style braid because of the turquoise thread that was laced in between the hair and the braid itself. It looked like this thing is very well taken care of. That's why I say it looked advanced, or maybe even just in tune with its environment. After a moment staring at it, it took off faster than anything I had ever seen before, and almost unnatural on 2 legs, but at the same time so fluid and effortlessly. I feel like this was the creature that Ronnie and I had encountered that day in the woods 20 years ago. I think it was just curious of us. It didn't give off any vibes of harm or danger, just curiosity, maybe bewilderment. I have looked at the woods, and the world, for that matter, very differently since that August. Today's third Tennessee subscriber submission. Hey Jeff, longtime subscriber, but never sent my encounter in. Not out of fear of what people think, I just can be lazy at times. But my encounter happened when I was younger, around 2006. I grew up in East Tennessee, around an hour east of Knoxville. I grew up target shooting and hunting in the woods behind my grandparents' place. Where we lived was in the foothill of the Appalachian Mountains. The place I hunted was a good friend of the family's farmland. The land butted up to my grandparents' land, so needless to say, I was always over there. The layout of the land was a series of hills and valleys. One side of every hill was a clear of long trees, along with a valley on the other side of hills was mixed with hardwoods and cedar trees. So my encounter was one day, late winter, I decided to go squirrel hunting, just getting out with my dog. My dog was just a black and tan hound mix, with who knows what, as I picked her up as a stray. This day was very different than the rest, since normally she would just run all over the place, and if I needed to call her, I would just shoot my .22 up in the air and she'd come running. This time, she wouldn't get more than 3 feet away from me before stopping and making sure I was still there. The day was the typical cliche no sounds of nature. I shrugged it off and kept going, even though I knew it was a sign of a predator in the area. I walked up one hill parallel the tree line, about 5 to 8 feet off. I heard something match pace with me step for step. I stopped, it stopped. The entire time my dog was at my feet watching where the sound was coming from. I have grown up in the outdoors and I know the difference between something walking on 4 legs and walking on 2. This thing was walking on 2. But it was in the cedar thicket, so I couldn't see anything past the tree line. I continued up the hill, listening to this thing more or less stalk me until I got past the cedar thicket. When it stopped, I walked further up and then down into the woods to see if I could get a look over and see anything. But as it never left that cedar thicket, I couldn't. I should mention that my dog refused to come into the trees with me. I walked back out of the trees and took the same path down the hill, still 5 to 8 feet from the tree line. As soon as I got to the edge of the cedar thicket, the footsteps started again, step for step. This entire time, I never felt afraid or dread like many people mention. I was more curious than anything. I wanted to know what this thing was stalking me. As I reached the edge of the thicket, there was about 10 yards of open ground, then a 5-strand barbed wire fence that separated our land to their land. As I reached the end of the tree line, the creature let out a deep guttural growl that I felt. I instinctively turned to face where it had come from and backed up until I was against the fence. The creature never came out of the wood line and into the view, so I never actually saw it, but I know what bears sound like as well as wild dog and coyotes, and this was neither of them. That deep sound and the length of time that growl happened, its lungs had to be huge to hold a growl that long. As I hit the fence, the only thing I could think was all I have is a single-shot bolt-action .22 and 10 yards to place it. I might as well have had a club. I stood waiting for the worst thing to happen to my dog and myself. My dog was standing her ground right next to me. She must have picked up on my body language, and she knew I wasn't going to run. I was going to make a stand. After what seemed like an eternity, probably close to 3 minutes, I heard the creature walk away. I was wasting no time to hop the fence and return home. I told no one about this, since I knew they would forbid me from going back hunting there ever again. The next day I did go back, but this time with a short-barreled Remington 1100 12-gauge, loaded with buckshot and slugs. When I reached the spot I had walked, I found a kill site of what had to have been more than one rabbit. I knew it was rabbit from the fur and bone I found. There weren't there that day when I was there. Today's 4th subscriber submission. I'm a wife of someone who had an experience with something at one of the worst possible times in his life. It was April of 1994. We had just come out of a terrible winter. We had the worst ice storm earlier that year that caused such damage and power outages in our area. Needless to say, by the time April had got here, my husband went fishing with a buddy in a small creek that leads to a small river. Always good fishing there. My husband's dad was a commercial fisherman, and this was one of his favorite spots to drop his nets. Anyway, the guys fished until mid-afternoon, and after running the battery down on the trolling motor, they headed back to the truck. Well, when they arrived, who would be there waiting on them but my husband's dad? His dad had been waiting to go fishing ever since the weather warmed up, but during the ice storm he had fallen and broken his hip while tending to the cows. He had told my husband on several occasions, "Let's go fish," but for whatever reason my husband couldn't go. Well, my husband knew what his dad was wanting when they pulled up. He wanted to fish. He told them that the battery was dead. It didn't matter. He wanted to take our old boat down the creek, and he said it'd be okay. No matter what my husband said, trying to talk him out of going. His dad was going. So my husband let him take the boat. You don't refuse a man like his dad. So my husband and his friend left and came back home. Fast forward to 9:30 p.m., we got a call from my husband's mom. Dad hadn't come home yet. He jumps up and heads back to where he left his dad beside the creek. He called his buddy that had been fishing with him earlier that day, and they both went to get Dad. When they got to the creek, the boat was not there. Everything was as when they left. They started walking down the edge of the creek yelling for their dad. They went a mile to the mouth of the creek where it dumps into the river. It was pitch black, and the flashlights only reached a short distance when they heard a buzzing sound like an insect, but not like any insect they had ever heard before. They stopped and yelled for Pa again. Then they saw on the other side of the river 2 sets of very large red almond-shaped eyes. At first, my husband thought they were deer. Standing and watching, when they flashed their lights toward the creek, they saw the boat on the far side of the creek. This might be confusing, but the creek meets the small river like a T. The eyes were on the right top of the T, and the boat was on the left bottom side of the T. The creek was too deep to wade across, and my husband didn't swim well, so they ran back up to the road by the truck and crossed the bridge and ran back down to where the boat was. When they got there, the eyes were still on the other side of the river. There floating by the boat was his dad. They jumped into the boat and pulled him in, but he had already passed away. They tried CPR, but he was long gone. They grabbed the paddle and the garden hoe that was in the boat and tried to paddle back to the truck. At first they hadn't realized that the boat was not tied off. It was just sitting there. They started trying to paddle, but they kept hitting something underneath the water. But that can't be. It's 15 to 20 feet deep where they were. But what were they hitting? Something, and it was jerking at the paddle and the hoe like it was trying to jerk it out of their hands. They were so freaked out. They had just found his dad dead. Big red eyes, jerking the paddle. It's a demon and it's trying to get us. That's what my husband's friend said. My husband screamed, "Come on, you son of a bitch. You got him, but you're not getting us." My husband's friend was scared and tried to shut my husband up. But he told his friend, "Don't be afraid." Then it stopped. They were able to get the boat moving. They were not hitting anything under the water. The paddle and the hoe were not being jerked anymore. On the way back, one of my husband's cousins had shown up on a four-wheeler, so they sent him to call rescue. When they finally got back to the truck at the bridge, rescue had just arrived. After 10 years later, we had a Bigfoot researcher go with us to that spot where this happened. I'd seen something on one of those Bigfoot hunting shows that made me think about the eyes they saw that night. This was the first time my husband had been back since the terrible night. He realized then that boat had not been tied off in the creek and river, had significant current, that the boat and his dad should have floated down the river but did not. And where the eyes were, it couldn't have been a deer. The eyes were much too large and too high off the ground. So what actually happened that night, we will never know. But my husband said if it hadn't been for the buzzing sound, they would not have found the boat as soon as they did. So did the creature with the red eyes cause my father-in-law's death? We don't know. Could they have been watching over him until he was found? We don't know. We do know that Pa spent a lot of time in the woods there and on the creek and river. So they could have known him. He could have known them. Oh, by the way, he's Native American. He was not scared of anything but respected all. I know this was a very personal story, but it changed my husband forever. He won't fish or hunt anymore. He does not want to be in the woods. I wish I could get my husband back. Thank you for letting me tell his story, our story. Same subscriber. Next email. I should have given you more location info on my letter about my husband's encounter. This happened in West Tennessee in a small farming community called Crockett County. on a small creek called Cypress Creek that dumps into a small river called Forked Deer River between Highway 54 and Highway 152. We used to live 1 mile from the creek on 152, and we had lots of scary things like hearing breathing next to the house and just creepy feeling that you did not want to be outside after dark. At the time, I didn't know what was going on, but when X-Files, the series on there, was a episode called The Detour, and the creature in this show had red eyes. And when my husband saw that, he screamed at me, "That's what I saw!" Needless to say, that was the last time he watched X-Files. That got me to researching, then finding Bigfoot started, so I eventually called them, started asking questions about the eyes. That was who the investigator was from, Finding Bigfoot. Now I've talked to this subscriber, and I love this person. We had a good, decent talk a long time ago. I'm going to actually email them to see how the husband's doing, to see maybe he'd be willing to come on. I know he wasn't back then, but maybe he is now. Needless to say, Finding Bigfoot is a shit show. No offense to this person. Then they know I'm not trying to offend them at all. They did a lot of filming up here, and they didn't find anything. Actually, I remember 2 of the cast members up here were at like a diner called the Hen House, and the owner is he's a character. You know, he's owned the place for 40, 50 years, and he messed with them, and I guess he had told him that he had seen something, and because they were like city folk, he had said city folk, and he had them walk like a couple miles through some fields and wood line. It was pretty mean, but anyway, let's finish this email. Sorry. I just realized I didn't tell you that the medical examiner ruled out foul play in my father-in-law's death, accidental drowning. There was no outward trauma to his body. I always thought that after healing from broken hip, when he had fallen into the water, he could have had a blood clot causing a heart attack. Also, my husband never told anyone except me about what really happened for fear of ridicule. He was a businessman in a neighboring small town, and we knew how the rednecks can be. So his friends, himself, and me were the only ones that knew what happened that night. He did give me permission to tell the story to Finding Bigfoot and BFRO, and they sent a lady investigator from Nashville. She was kind of nice, very understanding about the case. Her findings, as well as my story, is the one on Crockett County, Tennessee. She contacted me sometime later and wanted to put this on her show, but my husband said no for fear of small town syndrome. I myself don't think that it was a Bigfoot. And I know because the title of my channel, I'm going to say it was a Dogman, but obviously I'm not just a Dogman channel. And I'll explain to you why I have that name sometime later. I've had the name for 4.5 years now. Well, 4 years. Yeah, since 2017. But anyway, so the reason why I feel it is a Dogman is because the glowing red eyes, the fiery ambered color eyes, we do hear Bigfoot having different colored eyes as well, but I just feel like maybe Pa had been fishing there for so long that maybe when he was out fishing, he'd throw a Dogman, a couple fish here and there. You see it often. Throw him a couple fish over, I mean, in my eyes, it'd be more apt to throw a 4-legged canine, even if it's big, some fish, because, we care about dogs as humans, than a Sasquatch. And maybe he just had, a small heart attack or something, or maybe the Dogman stood up, and that really kind of put him over the edge, and unfortunately he was found passed away in the river. So I don't know. Anyway, today's final Tennessee subscriber submission is from a someone who's been on the channel 2 or 3 times, Rusty Coleman, or Donald Coleman Jr. Good friend of the channel. Like I said, he's been on other channels, but he chooses to share on mine because I try to be as nice as possible to all my subscribers. Real great guy. He's been on the show, like I said, a couple times. Really interesting. He's got a lot of information. He actually is the guy that put me in touch with Kumbo. So I got a lot to thank this guy for. So let's get into Donald Coleman Jr.'s Tennessee subscriber submission. This he sent me via Facebook Messenger. I don't use Facebook Messenger often. I should probably check it every once in a while, but I found it, and here it is. I didn't hear about the L.B.L. murders until I first shared my encounters with Lon Strickler on phantomandmonsters.com on February 5th, 2015, in written form using my own words. This is also a true story. In 1982-83, year I was a public safety officer with South Fulton Police Department in Tennessee. The local liquor taverns were exactly like front half in Kentucky and the other half in Tennessee, the rear section. And when local law enforcement did nightly checks, Fulton City and South Fulton did the checks together. Our state line authorities backed each other up through thick and thin. Now, one weekend night in December 1982, our dispatcher went home at 1 in the morning, so I took her place from 1 a.m. until 3 a.m. Usually, I spent that 2 hours looking through the city code books of law, see what existing laws were still enforceable and haven't been repealed. Phone rings at 1:30 in the morning. A woman cries out to me that her home was under siege by criminals, 2 criminals holding her and her daughter and her boyfriend hostage against their will. She barely escaped capture and was hiding under her bed when she called my local department. So I asked her 1020 location. She advised me on the northeast corner of Albion County, Tennessee, next to Weakley County, Tennessee, and next to Kentucky state line. I asked her why she hadn't made contact with either the sheriff's department, only with mine. I got my 6th sense telling me this was a bogus call. So I told the woman to hold on. I was able to raise on low-band law enforcement radio Memphis, Tennessee highway and had the 1033 emergency traffic and needed immediate attention, requested high-ranking officials with Tennessee Highway Patrol to contact me public service ASAP, and a captain called me over the telephone. I relayed the 1033 emergency traffic concerning hostage situation, and he then asked me this bizarre question: how far is the L.B.L. from this event? Which, at the time, struck me rather odd, like why bring up the L.B.L. in the first place? Which, at the time, never heard about the L.B.L. murders of the family of 4 that happened in March of 1982. Anyway, Captain told me to treat this hostage call as the real deal, and multiple agencies responded. 1033, like 2 Kentucky Sheriff's Department, Kentucky State Police, Obion and Weakley County Sheriff's Department, Martin Police Department, and Rescue Squad Ambulance Service. And I was later proved my 6th sense was proven accurate, as the woman takes an original Home Alone episode before the creation of 911. That stunt cost her 11 to 29 days in the county incarceration. You have my permission to relay this story on your Dogman channel. Okay, and then I have one of his encounters that he shared, but I'm just going to share the paper version first, and then I'll go off the top of my head quick. My pet peeve belongs to game wardens in Tennessee, Alabama, Mississippi, and Kentucky. No matter whose boat I am in, whether as a passenger or driver, our boat will get pulled over every time. It's like I'm jinxed. Cursed like in the movie Uncle Buck. He always referred to his beaver hat as people getting angry seeing me wear this hat, in case it was my flaming red hair and freckles that brought out the anger toward me from state game wardens without fail every single time. And I'm scheduled to be driving my cousin's deck boat on the Lake Pickwick August 22nd, 2020. We shall see if the jinx can be broken this time. I go with cousin Scott Edwards, who has a lakeside cabin on Lake Pickwick in Burton Branch in southern Hardin County, Tennessee. We would do multiple state long-distance river journeys all over Middle America, daily mileage in the restored 68-19-foot winter fiberglass tri-hull. He has it for like a pop-up camper, 2 side curtains and a mosquito netting, and boat seats fold down to make single beds. We also have a propane burner to cook meals on. Anyway, we lock through Pickwick Dam, heading first towards New Johnsonville, Tennessee, 105 miles ahead, to spend the night at cousin Laura Wood's residence and docked Scott's boat at Pebble Island Marina. After AM breakfast, we got underway, heading toward Lake Barclay State Resort Park and land between the lakes. That was 200 miles upriver. We arrived at 4:30 p.m. And a Kentucky game warden checked out boat registration and our safety equipment and asked, "Where is your fishing gear or hunting guns?" I replied, "Sir, we are only sightseeing and taking wildlife photos and enjoying Mid-America's river system." So he rechecked our boat again, looking for illegal contraband, and found nothing. And now I am really pissed off at his bully lawman static. And we filled up the gas tank and 5 other plastic 20-gallon handheld cans, went to the lodge to check in, went to our room, took a nap, got dressed to go eat at the restaurant, which has great food. Guess who I saw there eating? Game wardens, park ranger, and state police troopers sitting around 2 big tables after eating steak dinner. I changed tables and sat next to the lawman's table. As I sat quietly, I heard them talk about code names for cryptids like Sasquatch, Black Bear, and Dogman, Black Dog, and Werewolf, Black Cow. This code name is used all over the United States when lawmen are summoned to an animal disturbance call. This also includes sheriff deputies, police, and public safety officers or constables or marshals. The time, 8:45 p.m., February 2011. Same subscriber. First email, because like I said, that one was on Messenger. Along the Hardin and Wayne County, Tennessee lines from Olive Hill, U.S. Highway 64 along rural roads between Lutz and Tennessee Highway 69 south along Second Creek and Hog Wallow Road and Waterloo, Alabama, and along Waterloo and Florence Highway, 2 men in a dually pickup truck with mounted side large beam spotlights and a PA system. These men were earlier warned not to be traveling these rural back roads at night due to large packs of coyote, wolf, panther prowling alongside the rural road. As reports from the public riding in vehicles were being attacked by these creatures, and reports of livestock farms missing cattle, chicken coming up missing, deer population being suddenly thinned out. Apparently, these 2 men thought the warnings from local people is hysteria, trumped up BS, found out the hard way, and hooping and hollering all over outside the PA system most likely stirred up the warranted attack on the big dually pickup truck in odd places along these various roadways, especially near high-heel creeks and open fields in sparsely populated areas. Their truck was suddenly attacked by large German Shepherd/wolf creatures who ran along both sides of the doors, slamming themselves against the doors, and spotlights turned into high beams illuminating these creatures. Dark hair on the top, thick mane behind their heads, and rust-colored hair, vicious large canine teeth, amber eye shine, estimated by the 2 men somewhere between 175 to 225 pounds on all fours, kept up with the pickup truck of speeds of 45 to 55, and the assault episodes were in 3 different locations along these routes. which also ran along southern portion of Lake Pickwick and Lauderdale County, Alabama, toward next community. Even packs of coyotes were chasing after these two men. Guess you can say they are believers now.
Well, folks, there you have it. The early morning, middle of the night bonus upload. I hope you all enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I'd like to thank you all for supporting the channel. It is, after all, your support that keeps the channel growing and going, and honestly what gives people a chance and a place to share their experiences, ideas, and theories judgment-free, simply treated with the respect we all deserve. Thank you. Please stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, pets, family, friends. These creatures are real. They are out there and dangerous. Share this information with the people you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for answers, and God bless.